Good morning. Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, friends, I'm absolutely honored to be here with you. We have literally oceans of opportunities to explore and to analyze in the coming days. And to set the stage, I want to talk you through this concept of liquid borders. What does it mean as we blend the ocean economy with our traditional thinking about geopolitics and economics? That is the question that I will explore in just a few minutes as we set the stage for the first panel and subsequent discussions today. Now, the world is going through what I call a global connectivity revolution, an absolute paradigm-shifting volume of infrastructure investment that is connecting every society, every city, every country in the world ever more closely together. To understand it over the long time frame, you should really think about this infrastructure build-out as being like the systems of the human body. It is literally as if we are building a new skeletal system of transportation wrapping around the world, and a vascular system of energy, of oil and gas pipelines and so forth, and electricity grids that are linking our economies, and a new nervous system of communications made up of the fiber optic internet cables that are coating the ocean floor. Taken together, all of these three new infrastructural systems are creating a planetary matrix that powers our human civilization. And that is one reason to be very optimistic about the future of the world economy as we set the stage for our discussions here. Indeed, what all of this connectivity is doing is allowing our most ancient principle, supply and demand, to meet. And as you can see, every region of the world is now a very active participant in the world economy. Every region is trading, connecting, investing in every other part of the planet like never before, and on increasingly equal terms as well. Global trade is actually starting to rebound on the back of growth in our major economic regions. It's projected to be 2% of global trade growth this year. Now, traditionally, through the 20th century, the transatlantic relationship between the United States and the European Union, European countries, was the largest single axis of trade in the world. And it stands today at more than $1 trillion a year of goods and services exchanged. The US and China, one of the main other geopolitical relationships in the world that gets so much attention, is less than that, less than $700 billion a year. And as you know, there's a very large deficit between the US and China, which is one explanation for what's happening in American politics. We'll come back to that in a little while. But look at the third point. If you look at Europe's trade with Asia, meaning European trade with China, with India, with Australia, South Korea, and so forth, that already totals well over $1 trillion a year. And that's before so many of the connectivity networks are built out, so much of the infrastructure that is being invested in now, and before Europe even has robust trade agreements with Asian countries. So it is going to grow phenomenally in the decades ahead. And of course, Asian trade with Africa, Asian trade with Latin America, Latin American trade with Africa, Arab trade with Latin America and Africa and Asia. Every pair of regions in the world is experiencing greater connectivity, and on the back of that, greater opportunity. Now, Sturla mentioned urbanization. Indeed, a very important megatrend. Here I want to bring to life exactly what he said. Here you can see the pulsing megacity clusters that are the anchors of our world economy already today and for the next decades to come. Because urbanization is really one of the irrevocable megatrends of our world, of our human society. And indeed, he emphasized Asia. What you can see here with these ovals is that the largest urban archipelagos, these clusters of cities that can stretch for hundreds of kilometers, are predominantly in Asia, with populations not of just 10 to 15 million people like the largest cities in the West, but 70 to 80 or more million people, several times larger in population, and with an incredible economic dynamism and vibrancy, with youthful energy and very significant infrastructure investment. Connecting these cities together is going to be one of the most crucial ways in which we can achieve the potential in the world economy. Now, I mentioned earlier how this comes together is that the infrastructure investment that is being driven by Asia today, the trade connectivity networks, means that there is a new center of gravity emerging in the world economy. Historically, we're accustomed to thinking of Europe in the 19th century, America in the 20th century, and now we have Asia taking pole position when it comes to those economies that are the most trade dependent and represent the largest share of world trade. Here, what you can see is that China has already become the number one trading partner of more than 120 countries in the world. That is twice as many countries as for which the United States is the top trading partner. And even if the Chinese economy slows by a couple of percentage points, that doesn't mean that this will be negated. And what happens historically, as we bring this conversation around geopolitics, economics, and so forth, is to remember that trade relationships eventually become investment relationships. Investment relationships become alliances. That is the pattern of history over thousands of years. So we have to think ahead when we see this data. When we see the centrality of Asia, it is not just an economic zone, it is going to be so much more in global strategy. And indeed, the Belt and Road Initiative, the One Belt, One Road, that convened for the first time a couple of weeks ago in Beijing, is just one very significant example of that. What is so important about this map is the number that you don't see. The majority of the world's population lives on this map. In fact, it's closer to about 3/5 of the world population lives on this two-dimensional image. And it will always be that way for all of our lifetimes and all of our children's lifetimes. And what is so significant is that over the last 25 years, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, we have seen Europe make massive investments in expanding eastward across the Balkans, Turkey, the Caucasus, right up to the Caspian Sea that you see on the western edge of this map through major infrastructure investments. What we haven't noticed so much in the Western world is that for exactly the same 25 years, China has been doing the same thing, moving from east to west. And indeed, the Belt and Road Initiative is the third or fourth incarnation of a series of infrastructure investment programs that have been unfolding over the last quarter century. And now we are all paying attention. Because of the summit that was held 2 weeks ago, we are seeing that trillions of dollars of capital are going to be committed to deepening this expansion from east to west, and Europe will continue from west to east, and in the next 25 years, they will meet in the middle and turn the Eurasian landmass into the largest, most connected commercial zone on the planet Earth. What a tremendous opportunity for everyone in this room, which is why European countries and companies have been so well represented in these efforts. Now, you certainly are also aware that there is a very significant maritime component to the One Belt, One Road and the Belt and Road Initiative. That's why Arab countries, African countries have been very strongly represented in those negotiations and are very important in this room here today. Because indeed, maritime trade has already been the dominant driver of trade across this vast geography and is going to continue to be as many of these economies grow. Even for the landlocked countries, their connectivity to new ports, for example, on the Indian Ocean is absolutely critical. And that, of course, is not the only maritime geography that is going to matter so much, but also, of course, the Arctic. Now, we have traditionally thought of the Arctic as an amorphous region, if you will, just a geography. But now it's graduating to become a zone and an economy that we're starting to quantify. And indeed, here too, there is so much more investment underway as the maritime connections proliferate, as new ports are developed, as new routes open up due to climate change. And so this is going to become a critical passageway for global supply chains, for the shipping industry, as it also becomes potentially a geopolitical hotspot. And there's more when we think about the critical issues that relate to the Arctic region. Traditionally, this has not been a world population center, to say the least. The total population of the world in the Arctic Circle is around 5 million people. That's it. But let's bring in the complex forces of climate change, because we already know that temperatures rise fastest at the poles, whereas sea levels rise fastest at the equator. And so what happens when, as you can see in this forecast that's been produced by British scientists, what happens to world food production in a world where temperatures inexorably rise, as much as we try to prevent it, potentially up to 4 degrees Celsius higher than the IPCC baseline from the year 1990. And when that happens, you will see food production being generated more and more in the northern latitudes of the world. What is that going to do to the global agricultural supply chains, to the geography of the world population, to demographics and migration? We have to think about all of those things as well, because you are an industry that thinks in generational cycles, in decade cycles, and this is another reason why. And then technology, which has already been emphasized so strongly, and we're going to continue to talk about it more and more. Because, again, to think about the centuries arc of shifts, it was enough to think in the 19th century just about geopolitics and territorial conquest. In the 20th century, we began to think more about geoeconomics. Who has the balance of payments surplus? Which countries have the largest currency reserves? And today, in this century, we also have to bring in the third leg of the stool, the third corner of the triangle, the geotechnology, the balance of innovation that is also driving the balance of power. How are economies staying ahead in this century, or how are they generating the technological advances that are going to raise them up the value chain? And that is indeed one of the focal points of competition in the world today. It is the technology that leads to the economic growth that generates the geopolitical power. That too is on our agenda today. And a reminder of what that concretely looks like, that digital connectivity that is so significant in the world economy, and where indeed Europe has a very, very strong advantage, is in what some people call the invisible infrastructures, those fiber optic cables, those wireless networks that enable the services industry to flourish around the world. And whereas indeed shipping is so critical, the absolute driver of trade in the world, in the movement of goods around the world, the value of the services economy, those things, those bits that are zapped rather than atoms that are moved, is increasing in value and becoming an ever larger share of the world economy. It's not going to replace or displace shipping, but rather, as Sturla pointed out, it's going to fuse with it. And it is incumbent on us to have that conversation about how we maximize the opportunities that arise from the global digital economy.